Hola a todos. I'm JP Sniadecki, co-director of the film you're going to see tonight, Elmar Lamar, co-directed with Joshua Bonnetta. And I'm really, really sorry not to be with you all tonight. It was my original plan to be there in Madrid with you, but things became complicated here in the United States, and I had to stay to take care of a number of things. But you're in good hands with the projection team and the team of the screening tonight. I want to thank Chema and everyone else who put a lot of hard work into making this possible. It's an honor to share this film and have their support, and also an honor to have your support. And I thank all of you for coming out tonight to watch this film that we filmed in 2017, primarily in the Sonoran Desert, the borderlands, the desert that traverses both Mexico and the United States. A very beautiful but hard and difficult terrain, very rugged and often very tragically lethal and fatal terrain. The film, the origins of the film are not perhaps what you might think. We were not, Josh Bonnetta and myself were not setting out to make a film about La Frontera or immigration or the desert. We were actually working on another project that brought us to New Mexico, Arizona, California, of course Texas as well. And the border sort of called to us as we got closer, talking to Border Patrol, talking to migrants, talking to Samaritans, talking to people who lived on either side of the border. It began to really draw us in. And so we followed that initial encounter and that initial feeling and kept going back. We reached out to Jason DeLeon and many other people, but Jason was a primary consultant and friend and collaborator. And he is an anthropologist who wrote a really powerful book about the desert and how the U.S. government uses the Sonoran Desert and this very rough terrain as a weapon, as a deterrent, as a way to keep people from crossing in the safer areas and force them to cross into these lethal areas of the desert where there's very little possibilities for survival if one gets lost or one has an injury or one is betrayed. And he wrote a book about how the U.S. policy in the 90s shifted towards this kind of prevention through deterrence, where the fatal punishment for being a migrant, for coming across the border into the U.S. Was basically that responsibility for that punishment was put on the desert. So it was no longer a human responsibility, or a government responsibility, but it became a tragic outcome born of the desert, and often the responsibility was placed upon the people who were coming to the United States to seek a better life. So this really cruel and calculated policy. So his book explores that, and also how the desert not only will injure or kill people, but also disappear their bodies fast under the hot, hot sun. And so he put us in touch with a lot of people. We read his book. We read lots of other works like The Devil's Highway, Border Patrol Nation, The Desert, lots of different texts, and met with other anthropologists, hiked with Samaritans, did water drops, took water and food over to migrant shelters on the Mexican side and supplies, spent time with vigilantes, talked to a lot of Border Patrol, and sort of learned about the border through the filmmaking process. So it was a very processual approach to filmmaking. And we shot over 2 years, and shot primarily on 16 millimeter, actually exclusively on 16 millimeter, in part because the desert is so, and that Sonoran Desert is so highly visualized. And there's this kind of hubris of technology, being able to see and detect all things. And so we thought, our intervention was to use a much more reticent and fragile technology that nonetheless also contained an indexical trace of that which we filmed. So the traces of things left behind, artifacts and evidence of people, made a photochemical imprint onto the film itself. So it kind of creates this artifact, this kind of archive, this kind of witnessing. And people often ask why the title El Mar La Mar, and I'll just give a brief summary of some of the reasons as a way of leading into the film. So the title first comes out of the fact that the desert, in millions of years ago, was in fact a sea. It was a desert. I mean, it was an ocean. So the title was relevant for that reason. The other reason is that when you are not from that region, when you encounter the desert, it's like being lost at sea. It's like being thrust into a world of noise without a whole lot of signs and posts to orient yourself. Another reason is that while we were making this film, we were also thinking about not just the U.S. situation, but also immigration in Europe, and how the Mediterranean Sea also, with of course different circumstances and different policies, also disappears people who are deemed to be unwanted, or people who are trying to leave their homeland for a better life because of war or economic oppression. And then another reason is that the film, or the title El Mar La Mar, that those terms in Spanish can be both masculine or feminine, and we wanted to draw attention to the dichotomous ways of thinking, but also interrogate them and question them. What is this boundary between two nations, or between nature and culture, or between man and woman? We were trying to sort of interrogate those boundaries and dichotomies that we construct. And finally, there's a poem by a Spanish poet, Rafael Alberti, that one of our Catalan friends introduced us to, El Mar La Mar, and its lines have a lot of resonance with some of the themes in this film. Anyway, I hope that's a way to sort of launch you into this experience, and I wish I could be with you when you come back 95 minutes later from the desert. We could have a discussion. But I wish you a good projection, and thank you so much for coming to see the film.